Have you heard that Earth's population has reached 8 billion people? Yesterday, the United Nations officially marked the day the global population reached 8 billion people. So what does that mean for the future? And at what point will our rapid population growth slow down? To put this into perspective, since humanity began, it took roughly 300,000 years before 1 billion of us populated the Earth. That was around 1804 when Beethoven first performed his Third Symphony in Vienna, but it only took us the last 12 years to add another 1 billion people, or in other words, all since the first term of President Obama. So what are the implications of the crazy population spike that we've seen over the past few decades? Well, reaching 8 billion people has long-term significance for both rich and poor countries. The UN has warned us that the challenges of feeding, housing, and keeping that level of people from polluting the climate will be significant. There's no doubt that having more people on Earth puts more pressure on nature, as people will compete with wildlife for water, food, and space. And whether it's food or water, batteries or gasoline, there will be less to go around as the global population grows. Experts say that when you combine this with climate change, it's likely to cause mass migration and conflict in the coming decades. The world is expected to grow even more to over 10 billion during the next 60 years, with India projected to become the world's most populous country by next year, surpassing China. The UN expects the population to reach somewhere around 8.5 billion by 2030, 9.7 billion in 2050, and 10.4 billion in the 2080s, and remain at that level until the year 2100. But you might be surprised to know that the population growth is actually slowing down on a massive scale. In fact, we are now growing at our slowest rate since 1950, with under 1% growth in 2020. So even though it seems like we're going to keep growing exponentially in the billions, that's projected to slow down quite a lot from now on. In fact, you don't need to look far from home to see declines in population growth. In Canada, the annual rate of growth has dropped from roughly 3% in the late 1950s to around 0.7% in 2020. In the US, it went from just more than 2% in the late 1950s to roughly 0.2% in 2020. Africa, which has had the highest birth rates, is also seeing a decline. Between 1950 and 1980, the continent had roughly 6.5 live births per woman. Now it's around 4.4. It may not seem like a steep decline, but it's actually going to make a huge difference. And if you're still not convinced, just look at two of the biggest countries right now, China and India, both with around 1.4 billion people. They've also seen declining fertility rates, which is something we now know as a fact. Daryl Bricker, who co-wrote Empty Planet: The Shock of Global Population Decline, believes these countries are also said to have what is called an aging population. Bricker spoke to CBC News and said, China is now recording its lowest birth rate in history. India has just dropped below replacement rate for its birth rate. That's 36% of the entire global population that are now not replacing or not at replacement level birth rates. The single biggest factor is declining fertility rates. In fact, a recent report from the UN found that in 2021, the average fertility rate globally was 2.3 births per woman, down from 5 births per woman in 1950, and that rate is set to drop even further to 2.1 by 2050. In fact, 2/3 of people now live in countries where women on average have about 2 children, down from 5 kids on average in 1950. Now that was a whole bunch of statistics, but really think about it. How many brothers and sisters did your grandparents have? What about your parents? How many did they have? Now think about how many siblings you have. And when you really think about it, the question that we get asked these days is not how many kids do you want, but do you want to have kids at all? As we know, at the same time that's happening, life expectancy is also getting longer. In 2019, it reached 72.8 years globally, which is an increase of nearly 9 years since 1990. The UN expects that to rise to roughly 77.2 years in 2050. The population of people ages 65 and over is expected to increase by 6% globally through 2050. So really, it's both of these things, a decline in births and an aging population that will present a whole lot of challenges for us in the future that we haven't seen before. Well, that's it for this story today. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video.